This is part of what I've been calling my television addiction series. I've got a whole video explaining actually the logic behind why I'm doing this, which I'll put a link to in the description down below. But the short version is, this is me talking about all the TV series I watched from 2011 to 2012 when I was living in Cambodia and had access to all the pirated DVD box sets that they were selling over there, and was watching way too much TV. I'm going to talk about Breaking Bad today, but advanced warning, this isn't really going to be an intelligent review so much as it's going to be me talking about the circumstances through which I found the show and making an extended apology for not having gotten into it. I only watched season 2 and part of season 1. Sorry, fans of the show. I'm going to kind of explain my journey through this show. I first heard about this show in 2010 when I was living in Australia and was doing my master's degree there. I was working on a thesis and, of course, was constantly getting stressed out about it and then looking for ways to try and forget about writing the thesis. So one evening, I went to a convenience store and bought a magazine, which was an entertainment news magazine, which those things are so overpriced with all the glossy photos and stuff like that, but I just splurged on it, and I got a bunch of donuts and Coca-Cola and just kind of all I was stress eating, so all the stress eating type of junk food that you would get, and I was eating the donuts and drinking the Coca-Cola and just trying to immerse myself into this entertainment news magazine and totally escape, which, of course, as you know, doesn't fully work because you still have that little voice in the back of your head saying, well, you really should be working on your thesis right now. But it worked sort of. I remember in that in that magazine there was a profile of the actor Bryan Cranston, who at that point was known for his work on Malcolm in the Middle. I'd been kind of vaguely interested in him before. I think I had heard an interview with him on NPR once, and this was still back in the days when he was primarily just famous for Malcolm in the Middle. But he had talked in that interview about all the random roles he had done when he was younger, throughout like the 80s and 90s, all these kind of guest appearances on like Baywatch or whatever 80s TV shows there were. And talked about how, when you're a young struggling actor, it was work and you just picked up whatever you could. And he said, back in those days, of course, it didn't follow you around. It was before the internet and before IMDb and Wikipedia, where now you've got kind of lists of everything the actor has already ever been in. And it just struck me that, of course, everyone thought my image before was he was just that goofy dad on Malcolm in the Middle. But after hearing that, it sounded like he had more of an interesting story to him. And then this profile, I should mention, I was always a fan of Malcolm in the Middle. And his character in particular, I thought was great. Didn't realize at the time that he had any more dramatic potential. I think few people did, us casual fans. But the article was talking about how after he finished Malcolm in the Middle, he'd been offered all these comedic roles, mainly just kind of goofy dads and sitcoms. And he'd turned them all down, and he'd gone for this dramatic role instead, where he was a high school teacher turned meth dealer. And it gave kind of the whole premise for the upcoming Breaking Bad series. And I read it and I thought, I cannot imagine this guy in a serious role like this. I mean, you picture that guy and you just picture him as a goofy dad in Malcolm in the Middle with all those funny facial expressions. And you don't ever picture him doing a serious role, although, again, I guess apparently he had done all kinds of roles during the 1980s when he was just picking up whatever roles were available. But, who's seen that? I'm sure there's a compilation on YouTube somewhere, but I've not watched it. So that made me quite serious to just kind of see that show from that moment, just to see if he was at all believable in that role. The show wasn't out yet at that point. It was talking about an upcoming show. But then the show did come out, and via reading reviews on the internet and stuff like that, I was of course aware that it was getting rave reviews and everyone was loving it and was like the best show ever. And then I'm like, well, of course I've really got to see it now. I forget actually the timeline of what seasons came out in what years, but I believe when I was in Cambodia in 2011, at least by 2012, there were several seasons out at that point. 3, maybe 4, I don't remember. But I had trouble tracking down season 1, which happens. I've perhaps in this television addiction series, I've been a little bit guilty of portraying the DVD shops in Cambodia as just kind of like candy stores where you can find absolutely anything. You could find a lot of stuff there. But sometimes something would just be hard to find for whatever reason. And sometimes they wouldn't have it in stock, or sometimes you'd have to go to several different stores. There were multiple different stores kind of in the expat areas that were stocked, and different stores would specialize maybe in different things or of different selections. So I didn't find season 1, and I thought I would wait for it to pop up because if you don't find it one week, it would pop up another week. But I didn't find it for several weeks, and I thought, well, this is the kind of show where if it's as good as everyone says it is, I'm gonna watch the whole thing through, maybe multiple times anyways. So why not just kind of jump into season 2 just to satisfy my curiosity? I just wanted to get a taste of what this show was like. And I wanted to see Bryan Cranston in a dramatic role and see if he was believable in it. So I jumped in with season 2. Now I had a coworker and friend who was absolutely appalled by this. He said it's like a novel. You start at the beginning and you go through. You can't just jump in season 2. And I mean, he's right. I mean, there's that long-running debate about, is it really as complex as a novel? But it's certainly like a novel. Serialized TV is, in that it's a story that's told in sequence, and you don't jump in out of sequence. And it was. I was going to say it's slightly disorienting to jump in at season 2, but actually it wasn't really. You figure out who I kind of know who the characters were generally from the internet anyways, and what the basic premise of the show was, and you figure out pretty quickly what's going on. But I think what you are losing by jumping in at season 2 is maybe losing a sense of where the characters are on their character arc journey, or kind of what the stakes are, or why you should care about certain characters, something like that. But you could definitely watch it. And of course, Bryan Cranston, once you see him for a minute, you immediately accept who he is in that role. So much so that, I thought it would be so interesting to watch the guy from Malcolm in the Middle in that role. And I think that was a lot of people's initial reaction when they first heard about this TV show. But actually, it wasn't really that interesting because he was so believable in it that nothing really seemed off about it, if that makes sense. You just kind of accept that he's in that role. He's got the same face as another character you've seen in a different show, but you immediately accept him in that role. And I watched the whole of the second season, which I've got to say I've got slightly mixed feelings about. I didn't hate it by any means. It was perfectly watchable. I enjoyed it. I liked it even. But I didn't quite think it was as good as everyone was saying it was. And at that point, I'm already at that point. It perhaps had been hyped up to a level it couldn't possibly deliver on. But it was slow moving, definitely in certain episodes. And I know that's the appeal, is it is supposed to be a slow burn. I got impatient with it a little bit at times. And again, this was a period where I was just binging TV, one kind of DVD right after another. So my attention span was more geared towards stuff that wasn't slow moving. And so I had that biased against me. It is slow moving, but then it was punctuated by very dramatic elements. When stuff happened in a big way on that show. And I'm not going to give away any spoilers here just on the off chance, but if you've seen season 2, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There are some big moments in that show where some really big stuff happens. And it was some big stuff which was not believable. It was like, it was, I don't know. It's believable in the sense that this is a TV show and anything can happen that the writers want to happen. And it's believable in the sense that this is a TV show and you expect things to be more dramatic in a TV show than they are in real life. But I felt a little bit like the show seemed to be going for like some sort of realism, and the slow speed of it seemed to indicate that they were going for like a more in-depth character study, which these kind of really dramatic moments when people would get killed or there would be these fights or the big shocker at the end especially seemed like, okay, now we're just going really big and outlandish here all of a sudden. I don't know. I certainly found it entertaining enough and certainly watched all of season 2. And then I found season 1 in the DVD store, and so I thought, okay, well, we'll go back to season 1 here. Now season 1 really, I completely screwed myself over in terms of my enjoyment of this TV show by jumping into season 2, because season 1 is kind of the season where you start with him at a certain point and it's about his gradual change. And I'm like, okay, well, I already know where he's going to end up because I already started at season 2. So I got impatient with it. It was, again, a bit of a slow burn. And I just stopped watching in the middle of season 1. And I've never come back to it. At this point, I think I've completely ruined the experience for myself. And I don't know, maybe I'll wait 10 years and then pick the show up again. I think even now it's a little bit too fresh in my memory to try and restart watching it. But sooner or later I'm going to forget most of the show, and then maybe I'll just start off with it again if people are still talking about this show 10 years later or 15 years later. Or I don't know. The prequel, everyone really seems to like the prequel, Better Call Saul. Would I, if I do give this show another chance in 10 or 15 years, would I start out with the prequel and have that as my beginning, or I don't know, because some prequels you can actually watch them before you actually watch the series proper, but some prequels just rely on knowledge that you've gotten from the series proper, if that makes sense. Some prequels can be enjoyed beforehand and some of them can't. So how would you classify Better Call Saul, those of you who have seen it? But yeah, sorry, that's my journey through Breaking Bad, and my apologies for not having gotten into this show. Sorry.